And one of the things that I put on the PowerPoint is to make sure that you're keeping up with your reading. If you haven't read through chapters 7 and 8 so far, that is probably the next thing that you need to be doing. Wow, that's really bright, isn't it? And then we're going to get into chapter 9 today, and we still have, I think, 2 more weeks before we even get to a test. So make sure that you are keeping up with that reading. The last time that we were in here, we talked a little bit about geographic patterns and species distribution. So basically, how different types of organisms are found in different places around the world. And there are similar species that live in very different habitats and very different habitats that have similar species. And that depends on the evolutionary history of those populations. So one of the other ways that we look at the evolutionary similarities between organisms is in embryology. And so I talked about this last time where we're talking about the embryos, what's found inside of the eggs. And so if you look at a shark has a bony tail, and it's got gill pouches when it's inside of the egg. We've got a turtle who's got the bony tail, and it's got gill pouches. Even though it will eventually develop lungs, it doesn't even have gills. Go back. We've got humans who have the gill pouches and a bony tail, and as you all know by looking around, none of us have gills and none of us have tails. And a chicken has gill pouches and tails. So those things are not what they ultimately end up with, but they do show that we have similar evolutionary origins. Another thing that we discussed is homologous structures. Homologous meaning the same type of structures. So if you look at the human arm, come on in. Good. Hopefully I'm going to have enough room for everybody. If I don't, I'm going to cry. Homologous bone structures. So in the arm bones, a human has a fairly long humerus. If you look at the bones of the horse, they've got a fairly short humerus up there in the muscular part. We've got our radius and our ulna, which goes through our forearm. It's a little bit longer in a horse. If you look at the bat, they're a lot thinner because a bat is obviously going to be a lot lighter and is going to use its forelimbs for a different purpose. And if we look at the porpoise, it's got a very different structure, but it's still got the same bones. And so what all of these 4 things have in common is they have similar bone structures, but they do very different things with them. So humans, because we walk upright and we use our arms for grasping things, our bones are situated the way that they are. We could never run the way a horse does on its forelimbs, so it's developed a little bit of a different use. Bat, throughout the bat wings, has the same bone structures, but in a little bit of a different pattern so that it can fly. And the porpoise so that it can glide through the water. So they have similar bone structures, and at one point, millions and millions of years ago, we may have come from a common ancestor. So inside of you, inside of the human appendix, inside of each human, each one of us has an appendix, and if you've ever had your appendix taken out, then you know that nothing really changes from when you had it to when you don't have it. And so since it has no function, why do we still have an appendix? And so this is an example of a homologous structure. You don't have to write all this down. I was just going to see how small it could get where I would still be able to read what it said. So a human appendix is a homologous structure that has no function. So evolutionarily, back maybe hundreds of thousands of years ago, it may have served some purpose. So If you think about the great apes, like the chimpanzees or the gorillas, they use the appendix because the primary thing that they eat is plants. So since they eat so many plants, the appendix helps in digesting all of that cellulose. And since we have gone on to cook our food, and we've been cooking our food for thousands of years, we don't use the appendix anymore. So some of the other things that are included in those categories of vestigial structures, which means something that's left over evolutionarily, are things like the molars in vampire bats. So imagine you're a vampire bat, the only thing you eat is a liquefied diet. Why would you have the molars so that you could crunch and chew your food, even though they eat a completely liquid diet? Or if you've ever seen cave-dwelling fish, they're often albino white, and they've got eye sockets, but they've got no eyes. And it's because if you live your entire life in the dark, then forming eyes just takes extra energy from your system that you don't want to put into eyes. And so they've got eye sockets, but they don't even have eyes in those sockets. Or if you look at a whale, like if you think of a killer whale, they actually have pelvic bones where they would have had legs attached, but they don't have legs. So what that points to is a common ancestor back hundreds of thousands or millions of years ago. So the appendix is something that is found in humans that we don't use anymore, and that really only causes problems. The interesting thing about the appendix is, I was reading an article about when you're going to be a person that goes up into outer space, an astronaut who goes to live on the space station, they'll take your appendix out before you go up, so that, because if you were to go up into the space station, there's no way to do surgery on you to get your appendix out if your appendix ruptures. So they take it out preventatively before they send anybody into outer space. And I think that's really interesting, that they can just take it out and it doesn't change the way that these astronauts are able to function. So here we have that picture of the vampire bat. So it really only uses these teeth in order to pierce, which is perfect for Halloween. But it still has molars because hundreds of thousands of years ago, they might have eaten a different substance. And these bats have evolved to be able to eat food that they pierce and then get the liquid blood out of. So they have no use for those molars. And it may be 100,000 or 1,000,000 years from now that the molars would eventually just go away completely. So where we have some organisms that have structures that they have in common, we also have certain types of organisms that have similar structures but obviously didn't come from a common ancestor. So if you look at an insect and a bat don't have any recent common ancestors, but they developed because this was something that helped them to survive in their environment. Like we talked about last time, where the wing nubs are going to make it so that they are able to get the heat away from their bodies and eventually serve for flight. In bats, what it may have been is that they may have had a webbing between their forelimbs, and then if you jump out of a tree, if you've got webbing, you can glide, and then eventually it got to the point where they were able to fly. So we call that convergent evolution, where we've got similar structures, but obviously not coming from a common ancestor. So another way that we study evolution is through molecular biology, looking at the sequences of DNA and understanding that we have common genetic sequences that link all forms of life. So everything that's out there, every living organism has those A's and T's and G's and C's. And we don't know of anything that's alive that isn't linked to those A's and T's and G's and C's. So the genetic code provides our fourth line of evidence for evolution. And so we can actually figure out how related we are to other organisms. Like, we know that we are very similar in DNA similarity to the chimpanzees and to other primates. And the more distantly you and another individual are related, the more different types of DNA that you're going to have. So we would have similar DNA to the primates, and then it would still be pretty similar between mammals. As you keep moving back in time, we're going to be further and further away from the birds or from the fishes or from the amphibians until we have really, really distant common ancestors. We can study the way that that the DNA is similar. So DNA similarity between two species, we take and we compare their DNA sequences for individual genes. What is the genotype that gives us the phenotype? So, for example, in a rhesus monkey, we have 138 amino acids that are the same as those found in human hemoglobin. So, our blood is very similar to the blood of a rhesus monkey because we have 138 amino acids in common. And we could look at the amino acids of any species to figure out how closely related we are or they are to other types of members of their same species. So here we have some common ancestry. If you look at a human versus a rhesus monkey versus a dog versus a bird versus a lamprey, you can see the amount of time that's elapsed since the common ancestor was last shared. So 23 million years ago is the last time we would have had a common ancestor between the rhesus monkey. Or 46 million years ago between us being mammals. And so 46 million years ago would have been the last time we shared a common ancestor with a dog. But remember, we've got lots of humans, lots of hominids that have gone extinct. Same thing with dogs. We've had lots of dogs that have gone extinct. So in 46 million years, that's a lot of extinction that has occurred. And that's part of the reason we don't look or are not anything like a dog. So here, looking at the bird, we've got 112 million years. And between a lamprey, which is like a type of eel that has a jaw that latches onto fish and scrapes the skin off and then sucks the blood out of. So 564 million years ago. And the way that we know this because of comparative anatomy through embryology and through the fossil record. And then this would be the molecular clock. So looking at the amount of amino acids that we have in common. So the longer two species have been evolving on their own, and obviously we've been evolving on our own because we live in different environments. So they've been evolving on their own for that many millions of years. And so the more millions of years that you have in there, the more genetic differences that you're going to have that accumulate. So basically the take home of this is that all living organisms are going to share the same genetic code. So everybody's got A's and T's and G's and C's, but the degree of similarity in the DNA of different species can reveal how closely related they are and also what amount of time has passed since they last shared a common ancestor. So I had a TA last semester that used to study weevils, and weevils are like they're like a beetle species. And she would compare the DNA of weevils found all around the world. And so she looked at something like 500 different varieties of weevils and how closely related they were. So the ones that are in North America, they're obviously going to be more closely related because they're in a similar location. And the ones that are in South America, the ones that are in Africa, they're going to be closely related to each other when they are found in similar places geographically. And they're going to be very different if they're crossing a wide, like, continental with an ocean in between. But we can look at those things and actually be able to study them using computer simulations. It's really amazing. It's amazing how different they are. So much so that some of the professors here in the biology department have built entire careers studying things like, I have one professor friend over there who studies pond water, and he studies just the pond water in northeastern Ohio and looks at the genetic similarities. He's built, like, he's 70 years old, a 41-year career studying pond water. It's pretty amazing. So these laboratory and field experiments allow us to watch evolution in progress. We can see the actual changes in the DNA between generations. So because we can study things for multiple generations, we can see how things change just so slightly over time. So here's one example. The grass on a golf course actually has 3 types. And I didn't know this because I don't spend a whole lot of time on golf courses, but if you do, then the grass that you have in the rough is going to grow pretty tall, and it's going to be pretty thick grass. And then the grass that grows in the fairway is going to be a little bit shorter, and the putting green a little bit shorter than that. And so you may think, well, yeah, they do that with lawnmowers. They actually, a single species of grass that's planted on a golf course, because on the putting greens they cut it so frequently, and on the fairway it's only cut occasionally, and then in the rough never cut at all, they've actually had this selective pressure that makes it, so here's our monthly cutting schedule. If you cut the putting green grass very, very often, then the grasses that sexually mature the slowest are going to be found in the rough, and those that produce the lowest amount of seeds. And then in the fairway, it comes to sexual maturation very slowly and produces a low amount of seeds. But if you're the grass on a putting green, then you have to mature very rapidly and have seed production that is very high, because otherwise when they come along and cut you down, if they cut it down and they can't mature fast enough and they don't produce any seeds, then they're not going to go on to produce any offspring, and they're not going to pass their genes along to those offspring. So in just a few years, the grass plants from one planted golf course actually evolve into 3 distinct populations, and that happens in a matter of years. So we've also seen this with antibiotic resistance. For those of you that have already been in lab this week, we talk a lot about penicillin and about Staphylococcus aureus. That's the bacteria that we were working with this week in lab. It is the bacteria that's found naturally on your skin. So if you were to take and just scratch your skin, you would have Staph aureus underneath your fingernails. And back in the 40s, they used to have it so that Staphylococcus would be killed off very quickly with penicillin. And then after the Staphylococcus aureus became resistant to penicillin, we found that very little of Staphylococcus aureus is killed by penicillin today. And the reason for that is, it used to be penicillin would just destroy all of those bacteria, but then as people stopped taking the full rounds of antibiotics and humans took so much penicillin, it got to be that we needed more and different types of antibiotics in order to kill off things that used to be able to be very easily killed. And that's why we're coming up with antibiotic-resistant bacteria that are very, very dangerous in our hospital systems. And for any of you that are in athletics, that's very dangerous for athletes, because a lot of times it's found with people that have very close contact. So when we talked about our fruit fly experiment, where we wondered, can fruit flies evolve so that they can resist starvation longer, we found that after many generations, in this case it was 60 generations, that with natural selection taking place, the population changes. And so the fruit flies that we have at the end of the experiment are very different than the fruit flies we had at the beginning of the experiment. The grass in the golf course is very different at the end of the experiment than they had at the beginning of the experiment. And the antibiotic resistant, the staph that they had at the beginning, is very different than the staph that we have today. And so we've seen lots of different populations that have evolved, some over long periods of time and some over very short periods of time. So now getting past the physical structures, now we're going to talk about something that I think is really cool, and this is evolution and behavior. So what parts of our behavior are passed along genetically from our parents, and what are just new things that we learn how to do? And so we're going to talk about communication, cooperation, and conflict in the animal world. So we will talk about how behaviors are traits that can evolve over time, talking about things like cooperation, selfishness, altruism, and altruism basically means helping others, and how they can be understood with an evolutionary approach. Then sexual conflict can result from disparities in reproductive investment by males and females. So disparities basically changes in reproductive investment. Remember how I told you that the egg is always the bigger of the gametes? And so the female puts a lot more time and energy and resources into making that great big egg than the male puts into making his hundreds of thousands of tiny little sperm. And so because of that, there is a lot of sexual conflict between the genders. And so it's interesting to think about, is that why males and females are so different? Is it because of our evolutionary past? And then we have communication and the design of signals and how they evolve. So here we have a behavior that is something that has changed over time. What this chimpanzee is doing is he's using a stick in order to reach down into a termite mound and pull the termites up out of the termite mound because to him they're a tasty snack. And so the evolution of being able to use tools, how many species can you think of out there that use tools in order to get food or in order to build their nests or build their habitats? So behaviors are traits that can actually change over time. So behavior has an adaptive value just like other types of traits. So just like we have certain adaptations that make us be able to survive in our environment, we have behaviors that allow us to survive in the environment. So animals should always maximize their energy consumed and minimize their energy usage. So what this is basically saying is animals are trying to eat as much as possible and put out as little energy as they possibly can. So if you think about how that affects you and I, the reason that you want to eat all the time and then just be lazy and lay on the couch may be an evolutionary behavior, because we see that in all of the species. And so humans have evolved to want to eat food that's very high in fat. Because if you think about our ancestors, the more that they could eat, the more the energy that they could save up for a rainy day when there might not be enough food around for them to eat. The longer and more food that they store in their bodies, the better chance it is that they're going to survive. A little stick, thin, skinny person left without food is not going to survive as long as somebody who's got some meat on their hip. And so we've actually evolved to prefer to eat foods that are very high in fat and high in sugar. And so if you think about the things that you've eaten today, probably a lot of them have been pretty high in fat and high in sugar. And whenever you think of somebody's favorite food, their favorite food is usually something high in fat and high in sugar. Nobody ever says their favorite food is celery, because that's not what we have evolved to do. And so if you think of the foods that you eat, at a certain point, adding more sugar to a food makes it less preferable. So if you've ever been like, ooh, this food is too sweet, sometimes that sickeningly sweet flavor, there is a certain amount of preference for food versus the sugar and fat content in food, where it crosses, where it's the perfect amount of sugar, the perfect amount of fat, and you could just eat and eat and eat that. And so what they found through doing controlled experiments is that humans exhibit preferences for sugary foods that are high in fat, and the more fat, the stronger the preference. So if you think about, like, let's say you get up in the morning and you eat your whole grain bread, and you really like the way the whole grain bread toast tastes. If you add butter to it, though, it tastes better. If you eat a donut, that's going to taste even better. And that's because humans prefer to have things that are the highest in fat and that have a lot of sugar to it. And so certain species are going to have certain taste preferences. If you think about the primates, they prefer to eat fruits, and then they have other higher fat things that they like to eat. So feeding choices directly influence your fitness. If you have enough energy that you're able to grow and have lots of sex and produce lots of offspring, then that is going to be better for your fitness, better for you in the long run in your offspring than if you are starving. Because when you're starving, you're not thinking about having lots of sex and having lots of babies. You're thinking about where can you get your next meal. And so we all know that living and reproducing requires energy. And the maximum extraction of energy and the acquisition of essential nutrients, we're always trying to find the amount of balanced food, because if you're ever deficient in certain nutrients and you find out about that, if you take a supplement or a vitamin, then that can make you feel so much better if you're not getting enough of a certain type of nutrient. And then natural selection can shape the feeding behavior. So the way that we would go out and search for food, and the way all species go out and search for food, is going to change their behaviors. So what a behavior is something that is encompassing any and all of the actions performed by an organism. So behavior is anything that we do or that we perform, and it's often in response to the environment or to the actions of another organism. So on a daily basis, we react to what's happening out in the environment. Is it sunny? Is it rainy? Is it cold? Is it too hot? Or we react to the actions of another organism. So how do members of our same species cause us to act? So the best example I can think of this is during the summertime, girls like to wear shorts. And so you wear shorts when it gets really hot outside, or you wear shorts when it gets you lots of attention. Maybe same thing with guys, that they wear tank tops when it's really hot outside, or they wear tank tops to get the attention of the females. And so in response to the environment, in response to other organisms. And so the feeding behavior is just one of the ways that behaviors are influenced by natural selection. So here is the scope of animal behaviors, and it may be things that you've never even thought about before. Conflict, so getting into fights, and aggression and territoriality, like saying this is my territory and no other male can come into my territory. We've got cooperation, so working together. Alliance building, which is forming teams, and then sociality. If you think back to the natural selection game where the forks all work together and the toothpicks work together, or if they didn't work together very well, then their species may not have survived very long. We have competing for food and avoiding predation, migration and navigation, so we change our behaviors depending on what environment we're entering into and how we're getting there. The control of body temperature, so we may act one way when it's really hot and another way when it's really cold. Think of hibernating bears. When it's warm outside, they're out gathering food, waiting for the cold to hit, and then when it's cold, they tuck themselves away so that they're not expending any energy when the food isn't available. Courtship and mate choice. If you've ever seen birds do like their mating dances, or they'll have these certain behaviors where they're trying to find a female, often the males go through these bright, colorful displays when they're looking for a mate. We have pair bonding and fidelity. In nature, there's not a whole lot of monogamy, which is mating for life. There's a lot of looking for a mate and trying to get the most mates that you possibly can so you can pass your genes along to your offspring. And then on the opposite end, there's a lot of females trying not to get mated with. And so how long as a species does the male stick around after he has gone through his mating behavior? And then finally we have breeding and parental behavior. So if you think about a frog, once the male inseminates the eggs, he's out of there. And the female lays her eggs. She doesn't stick around a whole long time to raise all those little tadpoles. She's on and she's making new eggs and trying to feed and out in the environment. But if you think about elephants, elephants may have, well, they do only have one baby at a time. And then, yes? Okay, you can go get a drink. Sure. Okay, that's fine. So parental behavior, if you're an elephant and you're taking care of that one baby, the mothers are often very protective. And if you come up on a mother and an infant elephant, then those mothers are extremely dangerous because they will fight to take care of that one offspring. So do you have thousands of babies that you don't take care of, or do you have one baby that you take care of for a long period of time? They're very different types of parental behavior. So behavior encompasses any and all of the actions performed by an organism. So these are things that are heritable, so passed along from parent to offspring. So when a trait that's passed along from parent to offspring increases an individual's reproductive success relative to that of other individuals, that trait tends to increase in frequency within the population. So if whatever it is that you're doing makes it so you can pass along more of your genes to your offspring, and those offspring make it, and they survive and then can pass those genes along to their offspring, then that's going to increase in frequency within the population. So here's two examples, and these behaviors are called innate, which means that they are passed along from parents to offspring without ever teaching them how to do it. So in this one, we've got a goose. And in geese, if the egg falls out of the nest, all geese will go and they'll roll the egg back towards their nest. And if they ever see an egg outside of the nest, it's a fixed action pattern. They will always go and they will roll it back into their nest. And so scientists have done studies where they've looked at putting eggs of different species, and the goose will still roll it right back into the nest. Even if it's never seen another goose, it will still do that, so it's not something that they learned from their parents. And they did a really mean experiment where they put beer cans outside of the nest of the duck or of the geese, and the geese would still roll the beer cans back up into their nest. Because anytime they see something of that size, they pull it back into the nest, because that will help their offspring to be able to survive. So if the egg rolls out of the nest and they don't roll it back in, then the egg has no chance of ever hatching. And so it is a fixed action pattern where they will always roll everything back up into the nest. And so we have these sticklebacks. This is a species of fish. And during breeding season, they become a decidedly different color than they are during the non-breeding season. And they become this whether they've seen another one of these fish doing it or not. It is something that naturally happens because it is innate. It is born in them, and it will happen whether they ever see it happen or not. So we look at the role of the environment, or the degree to which a behavior depends upon the environment can vary a great deal. There are some things that are instinctive. So if you think about things that you say are instincts, like it's instinctive not to walk in front of a speeding car, or in this case, to roll the egg back into your nest. These are things that are born in you, that you know without ever seeing them. So in this fixed action pattern, the red belly on any male sticklebacked fish triggers an aggressive response. So if one male stickleback sees another male stickleback and has that bright red belly, then they will start fighting with one another. So we're going to see that behavior when we look at the beta fish, which will be coming up here in like 2 weeks. And so even if they've never seen another beta, once they see that display, they will go through this very aggressive pattern. It doesn't vary. It doesn't require any learning. Once it's started, it's going to run to completion. So with the betas, they would continue attacking each other until one dominated the other one. Often it's not until death, because if you kill off the other one, then oftentimes that leads to a lot of harm to both of the individuals. And if both individuals are so harmed that they can't go on to reproduce, then that's not good for either one of them. So fighting during breeding season. And then we have other behaviors that are learned, and some are learned more easily than others. So learning involves behaviors that are altered or modified over time in response to past experiences. So if you think about what we're doing here, we are learning, which is changed over time. We are not learning the same way that we learned when we were in elementary school. We're not learning the same way we did when we were in middle school. We're not learning in the same way we did in high school. Learning changes over time, and it changes in response to our past experiences. And there is tremendous variation among behaviors that require learning. Some things are very easy to learn, like for some of you, sports may come very easily. For others, writing may come very easily. For some people, math comes very easily. There's a tremendous amount of variation among behaviors that require learning. So here we have what's called prepared learning. Imagine we have a captive monkey who reaches over a fake snake, so a plastic snake, to get a piece of food. He doesn't know to be afraid of a snake because he's never seen a snake before. He's also never seen another monkey that is afraid of snakes. And so he has no idea that reaching over this piece of plastic should be a bad thing. However, if you expose a captive monkey to another monkey who expresses fear at the sight of snakes, so if he sees a monkey in real life who's afraid of snakes, or if you just show him that action on a video, he will immediately, the next time, he will become fearful of the plastic snake. Even though nothing has ever happened to him, these monkeys have passed along that fear of snakes. So a monkey quickly learns to fear snakes if it sees another monkey express such fear. Because if you think about what would happen in the wild, being afraid of snakes is helpful for a species to be able to survive. Because if you're surrounded by tropical venomous snakes that want to eat you or that are venomous and would poison you, then being afraid of snakes is something that helps you to survive.
Does the same happen
With dogs? I don't know. But I could probably find out. So I'll see if I can find that out. I'm not sure at what level that stops being true. It's funny because you wonder if dogs can even watch videos, like, you know, something about the two-dimensional versus three-dimensional. So in prepared learning, behaviors that are learned easily and by all or nearly all of the individuals, if you think about being fearful of snakes, that helps monkeys to be able to survive. Humans learn to speak very easily. The acquisition of language in humans is something that we are prepared to do. Babies start babbling, and then once they start, they never stop, as you will see from that one in there. So acquiring language in humans is very easy. So why is it so much easier for an infant to learn a complex language than for a college student to learn biology? It may be due to some evolutionary basis for the acquisition of certain behaviors. So everybody is exposed to language, some kind of language, but not everybody is exposed to college-level biology. So organisms don't learn everything with equal ease. Monkeys do not learn to fear flowers or a toy rabbit. They learn to fear snakes because snakes are the thing that can kill them. They're not afraid of flowers. They're not afraid of toys. They are afraid of the thing that's going to hurt them. So if you think about the ease of which a baby becomes scared of snakes versus a person getting fearful of guns, guns don't necessarily kill you the first time you touch them, and some people may become very used to handling guns. But with snakes, it's a much bigger learning curve because to get used to snakes takes a different kind of learning. So some complex appearing behaviors don't require complex thought in order to evolve. So learning to be afraid of snakes is not a really complex thing. Learning to be afraid of guns, there are varying levels in between. So if you think about why organisms do certain behaviors, why do animals have sex? Why do people have sex? They're not constantly thinking in the back of their mind, I must maximize my reproductive success. Sex has evolved to be something that feels good. And so people have sex because it feels good. Animals have sex because it feels good. It just so happens that that also passes along genes to offspring. So it makes it so that it's a behavior that organisms want to do. Just like food. People have to eat. Animals have to eat. They're not thinking like, I must save up enough energy for a rainy day. They're thinking, I feel better when I have eaten than when I have not eaten. That's why to some people, eating feels really good, almost to the point of addiction. And it's all about being able to survive long enough to pass along your genes to your offspring. So animals are not consciously trying to maximize their reproductive success. You know, humans can say, we are going to have sex in order to try and have a baby, but animals are not consciously trying to maximize their reproductive success, but they behave as if they do. And how does this happen? Like the retrieving of the egg in geese. So this is a naturally occurring fixed action pattern where if the egg rolls out of the nest, the goose retrieves it in exactly the same way each time. So by living by these simple rules, the animal can exhibit a complex appearing behavior. We think, oh, what I would think if I saw my egg roll out of the nest. So just by them performing something naturally, it appears as if they're having a complex thought. But really, what they're doing is they are trying to make sure that they end up having babies that hatch. And so geese will retrieve any object that even remotely resembles its eggs. It'll pick the largest egg first, because if you think about which is going to be the egg that's the most likely to survive, it's going to be the largest of them. So an egg will pick whatever looks like the largest egg first, even if it's not a goose egg. And so by tricking an animal, which is essentially what these scientists have done, they set up a situation that would never occur in nature. We can reveal that this is a simple behavioral rule. always grab whatever fell out of the nest and pull it back into the nest. And so this is a new study, something that's come up within probably the last 30 years, looking at evolutionary psychology. And Darwin predicted this back when he came up with his theory of natural selection, where he said, in the distant future, I see open fields for far more important researches. Psychology will be based on a new foundation. So if you think about 30 years ago, if we saw somebody drinking too much, we would say they knew what they were doing, they were drinking because they have a drinking problem. Now we know with evolutionary psychology that there are a lot of things that are addictive behaviors that people may not have as much control over as they thought that they had at one time. So if you think about things like gambling, think about things like overeating. Overeating is a huge one. Think about things like sexual addiction. These may be based on evolutionary psychology. So here's a great example of one. This is called kin selection. This, forget exactly what it's called. It's not a groundhog. It's I know it's in your. I think they put the name. Oh no, I don't remember exactly what it was called. But basically, this I'm going to say groundhog just because I can't think of. Prairie dog. There you go. Prairie dog. So the prairie dog has its whole little set of prairie dog kin that are all around it, and they're out in the savannas in Africa, and they are running around collecting food. But if a hawk comes by, then the eldest female will stand up and scream to all of the prairie dogs that are around it, and they'll all crawl into the holes, and she may draw so much attention to herself that she's the one that gets eaten by the hawk. And then whoever is the next eldest maternal female is going to go on to be the one that signals out to the rest of the kin whenever there is danger that is lurking. And so we may think of this as something that is really complex, and we may say like, oh, she's so brave, she's so kind, because we put these human attributes to animals where these things may be something that is built into them. Cooperation, selfishness, altruism, being kind to others may be understood by our evolutionary past. So in explaining kindness, we think about, does unconditional love exist in the animal kingdom? Altruistic behaviors, or working together, working with others. Some of these behaviors may come at a cost to an individual doing the behavior that benefits the recipient. So it may hurt the individual that this happens to, but it helps the entire clan, or the entire kin, or the entire extended family. So here is a good example, and this is kind of gross. This mother spider hatches like 50 babies on her back, and then immediately the babies start sucking her blood. And this mother spider actually becomes liquefied inside as these little baby spiders suck all of her juices out of her until they finally eat her alive. She's dead. They have eaten her completely. But she's got 50 living babies who had enough food through her body that they're able to go on to survive, to pass their genes along to their offspring. So by making this this ultimate gift to your children, where you become their first meal, this is helping her offspring to be able to survive and pass along their genes to their offspring. And so Darwin predicted this in natural selection. He said that natural selection would generally work to produce selfish behavior, so taking care of your own first, and then your extended family, and then not wanting to take care of strangers. And he said altruistic appearing behavior is common, but it was not fatal to his theory of natural selection. So what he found was that kindness towards close relatives, or ones that share the most genes with you is basically picking your kin to put most of your resources into. And then kindness towards unrelated individuals is called reciprocal altruism, helping out another not related species in order to hope that in the future they will help you out. So basically, I'll scratch your back if you'll scratch mine. We see this happen a lot in nature with things like if you've ever seen the buffalo that has the little birds that hang out on the back, and it picks the bugs out of the buffalo's skin. And so the buffalo gets nice clean skin, and he protects those birds that are on his back. And the birds clean off his skin, and they get a nice tasty snack. So they're working together symbiotically. So behavior is not necessarily always as it appears. Many behaviors appear to be altruistic, where they think, oh, this is helping another organism. But in almost every case, they are not acts of altruism. They are a consequence of either picking your family first or picking someone that can help you. And if you think about our experience as humans, that's really what we do. We pick our family first, or we pick the people that can help us the most. We'll help them out, and they help us out. And so I think that really does help to explain behaviors. So these behaviors are beneficial to the individual engaging in that behavior. And there we go. So if this did not work out for anybody, if they are unhappy with this, being in this room, I'll try and get some more tables and some more comfortable chairs between now and next Tuesday. If anybody has a problem, please email me and let me know, and then I will tell you if we go back to the other room. But let's plan. As of right now, we'll plan for next Tuesday to be in here, okay? Is everybody cool with that?
Yes. Thank you.
Awesome.